Welcome everybody, it's finally time to talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this game, but I'm not really interested in it. I'm here to tell you everything game related after I finished playing through Shadows in about 60 hours. In short, it's a combination of a pretty solid game with some disappointing decisions and a handful of technical issues that I can't really understand. Let's begin. As you probably know pretty well, Japan was a setting for the AC game that's been requested by the fans since, well, forever basically. It makes a lot of sense to have an assassin depicted as a shinobi. The series played around with some references to the Far East already, and when in 2022 Assassin's Creed Codename Red was announced, everyone got pretty excited. And after playing through Shadows, I think there are some things to be excited about, although I'm pretty sure it's not a game for everyone. The game is set in the 16th century, back in the time when a famous Japanese daimyo, Oda Nobunaga, was still in power. Since Assassin's Creed always used historical background for their games while not being historical at the same time, the same thing happens here. The events of the power struggle in Japan are here, we witness some of it, we take part in some of those, pretty important ones even. However, don't really expect to be shaping the history of Japan by yourself. You do have influence on what's happening, but you're more like one of the cogs in a pretty big machinery. The game begins in 1579 when a group of Portuguese priests come to seek an audience with Oda Nobunaga. They're accompanied by someone that Oda's people have never seen before, a tall man with a skin of a much darker color than their own, who, by a sudden turn of events, stays with the daimyo and in time becomes his samurai. We meet him as Diogo, but you already know him as Yasuke. On the other side of the barricade we have Naoe, a young shinobi from Iga province who is forced to defend her home from Nobunaga's forces. The girl is quickly thrown into a mystery she knows nothing about, and the one you know pretty well when you see that symbol. I'm giving you this very brief background on the characters because I want to give you the context while not really getting into too much detail in order not to spoil the story for you. However, this is the crucial part in explaining who these two characters are, because you'll be playing as both of them in Shadows. And while you do start as Yasuke, then you pretty soon get into Naoe's boots, and then for the next dozen hours or so, you're not going to be seeing much of Yasuke. This was pretty surprising to me because after the initial intro to the game, Naoe becomes your one and only character. You get to learn the ropes, explore the world, you set up the hideout, more on that later, and you start eliminating targets from your list. If you played any of the recent Assassin's Creed games, you'll know what I mean. There is a moment in the story where these two characters come across each other, and that's the moment Yasuke becomes a regular character for you, but I think it took me about 10 hours to get there. I'll tell you why that's weird in just a moment, but first let's talk about these characters in a gameplay context. Naoe as a shinobi is the typical assassin character you know from these games. She's good at stealth, she's really good at parkour, she has a grappling hook at her disposal, and obviously the hidden blade. If you're familiar with the franchise, you'll know exactly what she can do. She is, however, a bit squishy when fighting, so you have to be careful during open combat with her, although it's definitely not something that can be an issue as you get better at the game. Yasuke, on the other hand, is a typical combat-oriented character. He's big, strong, uses heavy damage weapons, and has a lot more health than Naoe. If you like to tackle some things head-on, he's definitely your choice for this kind of gameplay. He'll be able to dispose of enemies much quicker than Naoe, unless she's able to assassinate them instantly. Now, I played probably 85% of the game as Naoe. Why? Because it makes much more sense to use her on a regular basis. If you get good at sneaking and level up your skill masteries in the direction of an assassin, then you'll take more and more health bars from your enemies during hidden blade assassinations. That means you'll be able to take down most of the toughest opponents with just one action. Naoe is also much better at parkour than Yasuke, and that means that some of the places you visit to, for example, synchronize a viewpoint or climb a temple to find some collectibles, are only accessible to her. And when I got proficient enough at dealing damage in regular combat as my shinobi, I didn't need to use Yasuke at all. And so I didn't, because dealing more DPS in combat was not enough of a reason to switch characters regularly. Sure, there are missions where you have to use a certain character, or there are parts of main quests when you know you'll have to fight a boss head-on, so when the game prompts you to choose between your characters, you can go for Yasuke and it'll be easier to complete that section. But in general, the usability of Naoe is much higher than that of Yasuke, so you might find yourself playing just as her. Back in January, when I attended a preview event, I felt like these characters are distinct enough to have their uses, and generally I still agree with that. They are much more different than Evie and Jacob Fry and Syndicate were. However, when I played the full game, with the way I play it, I just didn't need Yasuke that much. Though, if you like attacking things head-on, then yes, you'll use him more often. Okay, a few words about the story of the game. No spoilers though. I felt like the beginning of the game is pretty strong with the way the two characters are introduced, and while the game starts in 1579, the main story takes place a bit later, and every now and then we take a step into the past in the form of flashbacks. So we'll get to see how Naoe trained to become a shinobi or how Yasuke became a samurai. This first part of the game, where you meet your enemies and you start investigating them and hunting them, it's pretty solid. The main quests are quite interesting, you're introduced to the world and you need to pay attention because if someone teaches you what to do during a tea ceremony, for example, it will be needed later on. However, the whole middle section of the game where you have two characters, it's pretty uninteresting in terms of the story. You keep investigating the Shinbakufu, their backgrounds are not really that interesting, and I'd say there isn't always a big variety in how you approach those targets. The third act of the game starts to become much more interesting because apart from the ongoing hunt for your enemies, you get to explore Yasuke's past and learn a bit more about the assassins in Japan. Some new things get introduced and I enjoyed that part of the story a lot. All in all, it felt much more interesting than Valhalla or Odyssey, but I think I still like the story of Origins better. Since I mentioned the main quests, then let's stick to that for a second. The main missions you do usually have some substance. There's characters, there is a story that leads to finding people who will help you against your targets, and that part is fine. The further you go, the investigations become much more of a chore because of how exploration works in this game, but let me talk about this in a moment. Side quests in this game, though, felt absolutely like filler content. In every province, you get some unique missions to do, but apart from that, you get the same missions dressed in different clothes. Hunt 25, 50, and 75 of this type of enemy. Or there's this group of people that did something bad in this area and you have to investigate, find them, and assassinate them. Or there's someone looking for collectibles from all over the map, so you need to, for example, steal treasures from military areas because this guy really wants it. Or you need to buy unique food at every merchant because the other guy doesn't really have time to travel and he wants to get better at making noodles in his shop. Apart from that, you get activities that give points toward unlocking new skill tiers for your characters. For example, you learn kata as Yasuke, so you have quick time events with different weapons. You have horse archery, you can draw animals, you can explore tombs for treasures, you can conquer castles to unlock a good reward in this castle's chest, you collect lost pages in temples or pray at shrines. There's many things to be done and most of it feels repetitive, and it's especially visible after I finished Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, in which a lot of thought was put into side content. Although I gotta say that meditation is pretty cool visually, and conquering castles for equipment was always fun to do, so it's not like I didn't enjoy some of them. But generally, you cannot expect a lot of variety in the game's side content, but like I said, story-wise, I liked the beginning and the end the most, with a special highlight being how Naoe and Yasuke meet in person for the first time. The number of side activities brings us to the fact that the map of the game is really big. Within the 60 hours that I put into the game, I finished the main story, I played through a significant amount of side content, but I still have some small areas on the map that I haven't visited yet, and some viewpoints I didn't synchronize. In order to max everything out, I think I would have to put another 20 or 30 hours into the game, but let's stick to the game world for now. I like how all the areas are presented. Looking at the varied landscape of Japan, especially in the right weather conditions, is definitely a sight to behold. The seasons that change provide even more variety to locations that you already know. What I don't like is that the whole map has been created in such a way that the only way of your exploration should happen on the roads. If you feel like putting a marker on your map and then heading in the direction of the icon on your radar directly, then don't. There's no use to do that directly because the terrain is made in such a way that it's sometimes impossible. You'll be mostly walking or riding through tightly squeezed bushes and trees. One of the reasons for that is because there are no random places to stumble upon. Everything is meticulously planned by the developers and the only things worth visiting are accessible by roads. And I'm not a big fan of this because it limits any sense of exploration if you just have to follow a certain path in an open world. But then you can think to yourself, okay, fine. I'll just turn on auto-follow roads on my horse and I'll ride to my destinations like this while just sightseeing. Valhalla has it, so obviously this game has to have this option as well, right? Well, wrong. This feature was removed, so if you want to ride a horse somewhere, you need to do this manually. And since everything has to be done on the road, you can use the white line to guide you to your desired destination by the closest possible route. It's called a pathfinder. Problem is, the road system sometimes make it so that you can be 200 or 300 meters away from a viewpoint, but if you follow the pathfinder, you need to circle around something, probably go to the other side of the river through a bridge, and suddenly you're over a kilometer away before you start circling back. I don't really like that map design. And also, exploration in this game took a step further than previously. Gone is the eagle or a crow that you had to use. Mostly gone are direct markers on the map. Now you get hints as to where someone is, usually consisting of 3 pieces of information, and then you look by yourself. Something that was already in the series with the exploration mode, but this time it's the default option. Once you're closer, you can use the observation feature, which basically means holding a left trigger on a controller, and then you'll mark enemies, but you'll also see color-coded important objectives if you're close enough. If you have trouble finding your target, you can use scouts from your hideout to search an area and mark a more specific location for you, although you'll still have to find your target in a smaller area by yourself. This feature is not bad, it forces you to explore a bit more, but at some point it just becomes tedious. I felt like sometimes information is not precise enough, so you can spend a lot of time looking for something in the wrong place, although that's the moment when you can use the scout, so it's not like game doesn't give you a solution to a potential problem, and it only happened sporadically when I couldn't find my objective, so it wasn't the worst thing. But let's stick with one more feature of the exploration, which is the viewpoints, the so-called Ubisoft towers that you need to climb and then you sync the area. There is a little twist on this because now once you climb on top, the animation circling your character plays out automatically, and then you'd expect the game to mark everything in the area on your map. Not in detail, but at least as points of interest, a question mark on your map. But it doesn't. After the animation is finished, now you have to use the observation feature to look around you by yourself and discover points of interest by yourself. I don't really get why someone would do it like this, because first you have to watch the animation and then look around and mark everything anyway. It's just counterintuitive. It would make more sense to do it the other way around, I think. First, you look around from the top, find points of interest, and once everything is discovered, you get the animation to signal that you have seen everything. But no. And yeah, you have to look around if you want to have question marks in the area on your map, otherwise you just go blind despite synchronizing, and then once you get closer, the icon pops up on your radar. At least viewpoints work as fast travel locations still. One thing that is really good about the viewpoints though is the fact that you can clearly see the area and you can easily notice other places where you can go. And it is pretty cool because it reminds me a bit of the original idea for Assassin's Creed exploration. Because did you ever wonder why the symbol of the assassins was on the roofs of the assassins' bureaus in the first game? Well, it's actually connected with the fact that you were supposed to navigate your way without any HUD markers. And when you climbed a viewpoint that was symbolized by eagles flying around it, you were supposed to locate the bureau by the assassin insignia on the roof. The idea was scrapped, but the symbol on the roofs remained. So in Shadows, I feel like this is a nod to the fact that you should be able to explore the land just by looking at it, without the proper markers or HUD leading you everywhere. But let's talk combat for a second. It was revamped a bit in order to fit the more Japanese weapons into it. Naoe uses a katana, she can use tanto knife in combo with her hidden blade, or a kusarigama, which is a weapon on a chain that's more for crowd control and fighting many enemies at once. Yasuke has a long katana available, a naginata, which is good for fighting multiple enemies, or a huge kanabo, which is basically a war club that is super slow, but does huge damage at the same time. Animations for all of those had to be created from scratch, and I gotta say, I feel more fun than I felt in Valhalla when fighting enemies. Naoe's animations are very acrobatic, she deals less damage but deals it faster, while Yasuke is very menacing on the battlefield and he can take a lot of damage himself. Both of the characters have basic light and heavy attacks, as well as posture versions of these attacks. Combat revolves around offense, dodges, blocks, putting your enemies in a vulnerable state to do higher damage, and then ending it with finishers. And everything is very brutal and graphic. Every weapon type has its own skill tree, so you'll be able to learn new tricks as you go, but if I was to sum up combat in this game, it's still very Assassin's Creed style, but more fitting to the setting we're in. And I guess that's fine. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Yasuke also has a bow and a teppo available for ranged combat, while Naoe uses kunais and shurikens combined with tools to attract enemies' attention and a smoke bomb. So that's pretty cool. Now, combat means equipment, and equipment is... well, there's tons of it. You'll be collecting armors and weapons left and right, and you'll be comparing stats on all of those to make sure your damage output is higher and it makes sense to how you play. Sure, there are many options to go for once you understand what your characters are capable of, but I'm so tired of just collecting a lot of junk and putting new things on me after exploring every area. I think that the original idea within the series, when you had new equipment unlocked gradually and you could get access to it further as you go, was much better because it was more streamlined. Here we're in the era of RPG mechanics forced upon us everywhere, and that's the result. Your gear can be upgraded in your hideout's forge, it can be dismantled for parts or sold at the traders. Now, another quality of life feature that finally needs to be added to the series is marking more items at the same time and selling or dismantling them all at once. With the amount of junk you collect, going through everything at the merchants takes an unreasonably long time, and it is actually an issue in a game like this that basically has you collecting all the crap that you'll sometimes not even wear once. Speaking of RPG elements, we have dialogues. In dialogues, you have choices, and I feel like these choices don't really matter, and the game will take you in one direction anyway. It might have something to do with the fact that this game offers canon mode, which basically takes away dialogue options and tells the story that the developers intended. You can turn it on before you begin if you want to. So, you might not be able to decide whether to kill someone or spare them, but at least you won't get this illusion that your choices matter. Also, romances. Yes, this game has romance options, and it feels like it would be better off without it. Romancing doesn't really change anything for the character, and let me illustrate that by telling you a quick story of how I got involved with a woman for the rest of my life in this game, in just for meetings. Okay, suit up. It's time for the Samurai. Meeting 1. Stumble upon a random NPC who has a quest for you, but he has a daughter who wants you to teach her some samurai tricks. She goes to live in a hut alone and waits for you there. Meeting 2. You visit her. She asks you to shoot 5 targets with your bow. You do. She's impressed and tells you to come back again when seasons change. Meeting 3. You come back to her and she wants to learn to ride a horse. Luckily she saw a horse in the wild, so maybe you can take this one. You look for the horse, it already has a saddle, so maybe it's someone else's horse, but it doesn't matter. You take it, she rides it, tells you to come back later. High five. Another change of seasons, and finally, meeting number 4. You come back and see 3 bandits attacking your beloved. For some reason decide not to interfere because she can handle herself. After that, compliment her skills, she will basically rob the dead, find a bracelet stolen from a merchant she knows, and you'll have a horse race on your way to that merchant. You give the bracelet back, eat plum onigiri as a reward for robbing the dead, you take a walk to look at a calligraphy set, talk to a wasted musician on the corner of the street, and then finally you stand on a bridge and promise that you'll stay together forever. The end.
Today and every day. For the rest of our lives.
True story.
If romances look like this, then they might as well be gone from the game. They have no meaning, they're very shallow, and they're poorly written, so for me it feels like a feature that's for no one. What I need to absolutely compliment, on the other hand, is the Objectives tab. If you're used to seeing a tab with your targets from Order of the Ancients in the previous games, then this one takes it a bit further. Sure, you have your main villain group in the center, but then everything is told via this Objectives tab without any other journal. Every group that's local for a province, every organization, your allies, everything is here and it makes sense. Also, it looks pretty cool when you can see the whole thing with your targets either killed or spared by the end of the game. I like to show it to you, but by the end of the game there's huge spoilers there, so I'll show the earlier version of it, while there's still not a lot there. All in all, if you like hunting for targets, you'll be here pretty often. Now, I need to take some time to talk to you about the technical aspects of the game because something went really wrong. I played it on PC, although using a controller. I put the game in the maxed out settings, I ran the benchmark, and the game averaged on around 90 FPS. I used full ray tracing and DLSS for both upscaling and frame generation. I played the game on RTX 4090, a really solid AMD chip, 64 gigs of RAM, and the game was installed on an M2 drive. Generally, it got a full treatment. However, even though the game was supposed to be using only about 30% of my GPU, I kept getting notifications that the graphics processor was under heavy load. Okay, fine, but I still got a nice looking game and really good FPS. After some time though, that nice looking game started to have issues. Textures weren't loading properly, as you can see right now on the screen. It actually looks like textures that you can see from afar away, because they don't need to be detailed and then they're much less resource heavy. Music cut off completely every now and then it came back after a minute. Loadings in the game were very frequent, sometimes even when you saved a stranger and then I have a conversation afterwards. I had a loading black screen in the middle of the conversation. It even happened a few times that I went to an NPC, I interacted with him, and nothing happened. So thinking something is broken, I went on my way and surprise, a minute or two later, my conversation with that NPC actually started, when I was already somewhere else. The same thing happened with the object I tried to pick up in the city, and during these situations, when I opened the map, I had a completely black screen instead, but getting out of the map usually made those interactions happen right away. Once the game even restarted my PC completely when I tried to record some footage with the Nvidia app. So yes, there are issues here. Issues that I think are related to memory and streaming textures that I don't really understand why they're here. Sometimes it worked well for a long time, other times it persisted for long, and everything while keeping my frame rate fairly steady. During the review process, a Day Zero patch was released which helped a bit, but it didn't eliminate the problem completely. Rather, it optimized the process a bit, because after some time the usual distant textures loaded in properly instead of just staying like that. The best thing about Day Zero patch though was that it improved how the horse handles, because before the patch, I don't think I've ever ridden a worse horse in a game. It kept bumping into things, especially when you tried to go on a narrow bridge, the controls were sluggish, it was really bad. But the patch fixed it and it's much more normal to ride. Now off to something a bit more pleasant. If you like city builders or The Sims for some reason, the Hideout is something that you're going to like. You start with a plot of land that has 2 buildings on it, and they are the beginning of your base. Some buildings that are required plot-wise you'll get access to pretty quick, and that can be a forge to work on your equipment, or a kakurega, which gives you access to outposts in the game world, which work as a fast travel locations and as places where you can refill your supplies, manage your allies that will help you in battle, or take on new contracts, for example. Throughout the whole game, you'll be able to find or purchase a very big number of cosmetic elements that you'll then use in the build mode in your hideout. I'm not good at this, so the things you see in the gameplay right now are definitely not on the most beautiful side, but I think someone with a lot of creativity can build their hideout into not only usability-oriented location, but also a very good-looking one. So maybe the Sims content creators can now go play Shadows as well. To build and upgrade buildings in your hideout, you use resources that can be found in the world or looted by your scouts every season if you mark the bigger stacks during exploration. Throughout the game, you'll also recruit allies that will live in your hideout and who can also help you in combat. They have varied skills, some more passive like distracting an enemy that notices you, while others can have powerful combat abilities. They are useful in gameplay terms, but the whole community idea that surrounds the hideout is executed in a pretty meh manner. I think Assassin's Creed 3 actually did a better job with the homestead in creating this sense of people working together towards an objective, and here our league feels more like a pretext to build nice things and have someone help you during gameplay, even though they keep talking about the sense of family.
I don't have friends, I got family.
Let's just say that by the end of the game, the only names of community members that I know are the first 2 people that are there, the owner and a kid that joined me very quickly. Okay, this video got very long, so let me give you a quick summary of things that I consider to be good, things that I consider to be bad, and whether it's actually worth getting the game. If you skipped most of the video just to get here, then welcome again. This is Assassin's Creed. This means that this game brings a certain level of gameplay with it. Some people like it and some people don't. Shadows is still an Assassin's Creed game, which means that if you don't like the series, you won't fall in love with it this time around as well. It's not a huge revolution, it's not an enormous step into a different direction. This is an evolution of a core gameplay loop that we've known since Origins in 2017. I still think I had more fun in Origins in terms of the story, but out of Odyssey, Valhalla, Mirage, and Shadows, this game is definitely my favorite of the 4. Visually, the game is really good looking. Character models and cutscenes, especially of the 2 main protagonists, look really good. The lighting and shadows in the scenes look really well made, although when you look around the game normally, it's the environment that looks better than the characters, especially if you get onto a really good viewpoint and you just look across the land. Music is pretty unusual for the series, but I think it managed to capture the spirit of mixture of modernity and tradition pretty well. At times it has a bit of a Wild West motifs in some of its score, but the general ambience is much more Eastern. There are some weird design decisions here. I don't like that you have to explore the map mainly by roads, because there's nothing to see if you're trying to find a shortcut. Removing the follow road button from the game is a crime in itself. While the story is generally solid, the middle part of the game is the most unsurprising, but it's the filler content when it comes to side quests and the generic map activities that bored me more. 2 characters in this game are different from each other, and you might prefer one over the other depending on your playstyle, but I found that Naoe has much more utility in the game, and you can complete most of the game as the shinobi, while only playing the samurai in quests in which he's required. Also, I feel like the character development system is unnecessarily bloated, and it could actually use some simplification. New animations in the game, especially for the shinobi, are really awesome. It's fun to parkour through locations in her shoes. Combat is satisfying, although it's not a revolution, so it's still pretty casual. Some RPG elements in this game, like dialogue choices, romances, or tons of equipment you collect, I'm not really a fan of, but that comes with the "it's still Assassin's Creed" part. My biggest issue at the moment were the technical problems with textures and delayed interactions in the game, but luckily this is something that can be fixed with patches. The question remains, should you get Assassin's Creed Shadows? If you're a fan of the more recent games in the series, then yes, absolutely. This game will feel familiar while introducing some new elements to it, but it's not a huge change. Hopefully the console versions are more stable than PC, so maybe the technical issues will not be a problem. Make sure to read or watch something more about the game to see if this is an issue that other people had as well. In the worst case scenario, just wait for patches before buying it. If you're a fan of the older games, like Ezio's Trilogy for example, and you're bored with the whole new RPG style of Assassin's Creed, then I'm afraid you won't like this one either. Its story is not concise, you'll have to deal with all the RPG systems that are not always the best, and while there is some chemistry between the two main characters, your allies are not that memorable, and villains are not really as characteristic as, for example, the Borgia family, who actually do get a shout out in this game. Although I gotta say, I feel there was more character to these villains than to the whole Order of the Ancients in the previous games. It's not the best game in the 18 years of the franchise. However, for some people, this will be the best Assassin's Creed in its latest form since 2017. For me, this one lands right after Origins, but I definitely enjoyed it more than Valhalla, in which I spent 120 hours and I hated myself for wasting so much time on this game. But this is it. I know it's a long video, but I wanted to give you a detailed view on all the elements I thought were important to talk about when we look at Shadows as simply a game to play, not a controversy. And now that we're finally in Japan, we need to find a new dream setting for this series. What do you think would it be? Let me know in the comments, and if you made it till the end, you're absolutely awesome. Thank you, take care, and see you next time.